morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. As you all know, we are welcoming not only folks in person, but those that are also live streaming via mdc.edu/livestream. So we'd like to welcome you. My name is Jacqueline Mooney. I serve as the chairperson for the Social Sciences Department here at Miami-Dade College North Campus. And it is an honor today to have our esteemed guests. But before I introduce, I just wanted to say that today's very important dialogue, interfaith dialogue, thank you, is amongst some of our most fantastic community members. So we are so looking forward to being able to hear about each and every one of them. And hosting today's event is Dr. Mohammed Humayunbash. All right. He's the founding director of the Institute for Interfaith Dialogue and Education at Miami-Dade College. He's also a lecturer at the School of International Public Affairs at FIU and Religious Studies Department at the University of Miami. He is a very good friend of Miami-Dade College. We love working with him as well as the Jaffra Institute, and we are very excited for today's events. Also, a very big thank you to our executive leadership, President Fermin Vasquez, Dean Venezuela, as well as our faculty members, Professors Dr. Michael Lanigan and Richard Tapia. Thank you so much, and now on to our host.
Good morning. So good morning, everyone. I know we have a large audience viewing online, so thank you for being here. My name is, as Jackie said, Mohammed Humayunbash, and I am the founding director of the Jaffra Institute for Interfaith Dialogue and Education. Today's event is actually, quite fitting for the mission and vision of the Jaffra Institute, which is to foster, a culture of sympathy and genuine curiosity across different Abrahamic faith systems. And I think, today's speakers are going to be capturing that Abrahamic tradition and its intersection with the concept of peace for us quite comprehensively. I also want to thank, as Dr. Mike Lanigan said, reminded me, University of Airlangga in Indonesia students, who I'm assuming are watching live or will be watching later as well. But to sort of set the tone for the conversation today, I was just looking through my notes for my Introduction to Peace Studies and Conflict Resolution course that I teach, and how the notion of faith and interfaith dialogue and building bridges across different faith systems could contribute to that culture of peace and eschewing violence at both local, national, and even international and global levels, hopefully. And I came across this verse from the Holy Quran that I'll recite its English translation for you, and then we'll get started with our panelists. So this is from chapter 4 of the Quran, verses 163 through 165. And it reads, "We inspired thee," meaning Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, "as we inspired Noah and the prophets after him, as we inspired Abraham and Ishmael and Isaac and Jacob, and the tribes and Jesus and Job and Jonah and Aaron and Solomon, and as we imparted unto David the Psalms and messengers. We have mentioned unto thee before, and messengers we have not mentioned unto thee. And God spoke directly to Moses, messengers of good news and warning, in order that mankind might have no argument against God after the messengers. God is mighty and wise." And this is the so-called the interfaith subtext that sort of reverberates throughout the Quran, and I think there's much potential actually in the Quran, and I'm sure in other Abrahamic, holy books that could be tapped into to sort of extract and extrapolate from these books that essence of peace and dialogue and even diversity, some of the new notions that we talk about. And actually some of these so-called like modern notions like inclusivity and diversity and equity and so forth. I think you have very strong foundations for them in the Abrahamic tradition, and the way for example, Muslims, Jews, and Christians back in Andalusia, it's just 1,000 years ago, lived in harmony, and they sort of learned from each other and created a relationship of synergy 1,000 years ago. So a lot of rifts and fault lines that you actually see across at least the Abrahamic tradition that we see today, these are very modern phenomena, and you don't have the same sort of manifestation for them that we saw in the 20th century and in the 21st century back in the day. So identity politics and identity issues in a way are more pronounced today than they were 1,000 years ago. So with that said, I would like to introduce our panelists very briefly, and then we'll get started with the conversation. To my right, not politically, but physically, is Rabbi Rachel Greengrass, who's been part of Beth Am family since 2008, and on that website for your biography, it says that you believe that Judaism is a beautiful tool through which we can live spiritual lives of meaning and heal the world. So beautiful. And then we have in the center Reverend Kim Robles. She is transitional pastor for Miami Shores Presbyterian Church. And to the extreme right, we have Imam Abdul Hamid Samra, who is the Imam for Islamic Center of Greater Miami, and Imam Samra is also a professor at the University of Miami. So again, thank you so much for kindly accepting our invitation, especially Rachel and Imam Samra. I know it was last minute, and I was being very pushy, but you were being very generous. So thank you for that. So to get the conversation started, I just wanted to ask you, from your perspective, where Judaism, Christianity, and Islam stand on the question of peace, and maybe different dimensions of peace, like inner peace or internal peace versus external peace. Sometimes we talk about positive peace versus negative peace as as lack of violence and conflict, and maybe we could you could unpack that question, that notion from your own perspective, faith tradition. Thank you.
Thanks for having me and us. So that is a very big question that you are springing on me. There is actually a section of the Talmud. While all of us share the Torah and the prophets and the writings as sacred books, in Judaism we also have what's called the oral Torah, which is written down, called the Talmud. And in there's an entire section that starts with how great is peace. And it just talks about the extents that we will go to in order to create peace. So one example from the Torah is that of Sarah and Abraham. You guys could tell this story as well. So Sarah is 90 before she has her first child. So you might think, that shop is closed, right? So she thought that. She asked her handmaid Hagar to have a child with Abraham. And then she hears angels speaking to Abraham. Abraham rushes out to welcome these three men, showing them hachnasat orchim, audacious hospitality. And they tell Abraham that he is going to have a son through Sarah. And Sarah laughs. And Sarah says, I'm going to have joy through my husband at this age, right? So we can read that in a modern sense and say, you think he's going to be able to, you know? But when God talks to Abraham, God changes her words to say, she said that she didn't think she would be able to have a child in her old age. So how great is peace that God will actually change what someone has said. How great is peace? We bury non-Jews along with Jews. How great is peace? We eat together. We break bread. And I think there's so much more to unpack. I'd love for my friends to jump in, and then maybe I can come back with more.
Thank you so much. And thank you also for having me here. It's an honor to be next to these two. So thank you. Also, this is a big question, I agree. And if we can really answer these, maybe we'll get closer to having that peace. It's just, these are complicated matters. But I was thinking quite a bit about Jesus and how I really believe that Jesus walked the earth, that God walked the earth to bring shalom, to bring peace to this world, and tried to demonstrate to his followers and really to the whole world what that peace should and could look like. And he leaned back quite a bit on his Jewish tradition. And one of the parts that I've been reflecting on quite a bit are the idea of the need to love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength, which is the Shema, and love your neighbor as yourself, which I think the best way that he demonstrates that is through the story of the Good Samaritan. So I could tell more about that if you are intrigued, but I think that Jesus was really trying to break down boundaries to help people understand that even though there were differences, they were man-made differences, and that we were called to care for one another as part of God's creation.
Assalamu alaikum. Shalom alaikum. And peace be with you. I'm very honored to be among you, with my cousins, sisters, you know, by the way, Ishmael and Isaac were brothers, you know, so we are cousins. So, well, the name of Islam as a word, when it comes to in Arabic, it means peace also. One of the meaning, in addition to submission, to surrender yourself to God, that's what the meaning of Islam, and then you attain peace when you do that. You attain peace. And one of the names of God, of course, in Islam we have like 99 names for God, and one of his name is the peace, as-salam, the peace. He is the owner of the peace. He is the giver of the peace. So it is. I mean, the whole message is based on peace, and of course, when we talk about like inner peace and outer peace, in fact, which is interesting, the Quran mentioned 25 prophets and messengers by names. I mean the names. Of course, Quran says there's more than that, more number of prophets, but all of them, all the prophet and the messenger, when we were talking to their people or try to promote the message of God, they talked about peace and say we are, you know, Muslim in a way, not as the follower of Prophet Muhammad, peace be on him, but all the followers, all those who submitted themselves, surrendered themselves to the will of God, and work for peace under, you know, Arabic expression is called Muslims. So even starting from Adam and then Noah and then Abraham and all his descendants and Moses, Jesus, all of them, they say we came with peace, and we want everyone to surrender to God and submit himself or herself to God so they can attain peace. So the whole message, if the peace is not there, there's no meaning for any message, because that what the most important things that we could take from our faith is how to live in peace with ourselves, that we call it the inner peace, and then how we live in peace with other people.
So I want to just jump back at beautiful. The Reverend mentioned the Shema. So all of our faith traditions, all Abrahamic faith traditions, have the same creation story, that we were all created from earth, and that God breathed life into us, and that each and every one of us is created in the divine image. So I know it's different in Christianity, especially in different branches, but in Islam and in Judaism, we don't have images of not that you have images of God, but you have Jesus, right? And you have saints if you're Catholic, and etc. But the reason we don't have images of God is because we are supposed to look at each other if we want to see the divine. If I want to see God, I look at somebody else, and there are sections of the Torah that talk about when we go to war, because we're going to go conquer the land. And it says that you have to warn everybody. You have to give people, you cannot surround a community, you have to give them an out. That you have to offer terms of peace, and that you have to clean up after yourself, right? And spare trees. So a lot. So I know this is not like topics about today, but even when you see Israel, who very much tries to live by Jewish values, you'll see that when they are going to attack a certain location, they will actually tell everybody in that location. They drop pamphlets, we're going to be bombing the area, so that people can leave.
All right, thank you so much. And another question that I've been, grappling with myself is that, religious institutions have a lot of social capital. I mean, if you think about it, in terms of the network, in the infrastructure, positions of authority and trust that religious institutions, possess, that even our, government today maybe doesn't. I mean, look at the numbers, in terms of trust in our government, they're like in single digits. But look at, religious institutions, they're, I don't know, in the 60s, 70s, and 80% of the world's population, by a lot of accounts, subscribe to a form of religion. So against that backdrop, I think a perplexing question for me, coming from an international relations perspective, is that how could we leverage that social capital to more concretely, more operationally, contribute to the cause of peace, again, at different levels. Maybe locally, religious institutions do a much better job than a more macro level. So what do you think are some of the mechanisms that we could utilize to maybe more operationally, as I say, bring about peace?
Yeah, and God told us in the Quran first that peace cannot be attained without justice. Justice is an essential part, and that is starting from the individual, from the inner peace. The verse said, الذين آمنوا ولم يلبسوا إيمانهم بظلم أولئك لهم الأمن وهم مهتدون. Those who believed and they did not include with their faith any injustice. They did not, did any injustice. Then those will be rewarded with inner peace, and they have always safe and secure. And God says in another verse that that God created us different, not the same. We have to acknowledge our differences. We have to acknowledge different thinking, different faith, different look, and be content with what God, gave us and how God created us. But we need to acknowledge so we can coexist with other people peacefully and live peacefully. This is the message of Islam. If I want to summarize it, which has been repeated many times in the Quran and also in the practice of the Prophet, that to believe in one God and then to be good to other people, to do righteous deed, do good deed. That's what is the message. And to attain peace and to be able to spread the peace, you have to live yourself, or myself, I have to attain the inner peace inside. And the inner peace inside, I cannot attain it if I'm doing any injustice to anyone. Could be to my spouse, could be to my children, could be to my neighbors, could be to anyone. If any injustice being done, then peace is not possible.
Thank you.
I love that, and I agree. We cannot experience peace without justice. That is essential, and I loved your story about finding the divine in those around us, in the faces, in terms of creation. And I truly believe if we want to get to that place of justice and peace, we have a lot of inner work to do, a lot of sitting in stillness and contemplation and being in touch with the divine inside us and around us. And that's how we will know and hear how to be honest to ourselves, authentic to our God and to those around us. Because I think that we always have work to do. I've been thinking back to one of Martin Luther King Jr.'s religious or spiritual teachers and guides, Howard Thurman, and he was really all about taking that time to be still, to find that inner peace, and that without that we could not achieve any peace.
The Torah it's the story of creation of the world, of the world's first families, of these fundamental truths. But when you get to the end, it is a vision for a different kind of a place, a homeland, a promised land, where the structures of power will be different, where the poor and the widow and the orphan are taken care of, where everybody is, the stranger is spoken about so much. And the word ger, which means stranger in modern Judaism, means a convert, but it doesn't mean that, because it says, for you were gerim in Egypt. We weren't converts in Egypt, right? We were strangers, we were foreigners, we were refugees. So we get this vision and this incredibly political document. And then we go into the land and we fail, and that's why we have all of the books of Judges, and we have the prophets who come and excoriate us and say, you're going to temple, right? You're offering the sacrifices, you're fasting on Yom Kippur, but this is not the fast I want, right? This is not what justice looks like. And I think, all of our faiths at their core, right? I'm sure all of you know people who go to their house of worship regularly and are terrible people. That is not what it means to live in relationship with a higher power, right? When we admit that there is a higher power, that there's something more important than me, then automatically we are feeling responsible. And we are responsible to our grandparents, and we're responsible to our grandchildren, and we are responsible to the stranger because that was us. And and in everyone we see the face of God. So of course we become political. You guys probably know this. Jews in the United States are very organized politically. We are often overrepresented, and that is because every time we pray, every time we study, we are told if I am reading this prayer from peace from my prayer book and I'm not doing anything to make it happen, then I am not living my faith. There is a line from the Jerusalem Talmud, which says that if you read Torah and you don't go do justice, it's better you never read it in the first place. So for us, every time we study, every time we pray, every time we celebrate a holiday, and especially the high holidays, which are this week, where we read these sections from the prophets, we're reminded again and again that it is our responsibility to bring justice to the world, to bring peace, and to really take care of all of God's creatures, whether they are Jewish or not.
Thank you. I need to thank you again, especially since you're here before the high holidays, so appreciate it. So I wanted to, and if there are any questions from the audience, we could take them as well. But I was wondering if maybe we could address some of the adjacent concepts to peace, like coexistence, like harmony, and something that's in vogue, these days, thenotion of multiculturalism. And if you could sort of tap into, the Judaic, the Islamic, or the Christian tradition, and if you couldn't find any, anecdotes, any examples of this notion of coexistence with other, faith communities, and bridge building with other faith communities. I know I'm throwing, all these hardball questions at you, but.
Yes, I think one of the important things is create division and sometimes animosity. One of the reasons is lack of education. I think education will be a good tool that when you educate people, and especially when they know about each other. Unfortunately, as a human, we are after power. We want just get to the power, and religion is used for that. And a lot of course, politics. Of course, you mentioned some, Jewish community very well organized in politics. Now, I'm wondering, like any other people, when it comes to something has to do with self-interest, with community interest, is religion is above that, or what is? Yeah, I've seen we go to the, for example, we pray 5 times, we go to the masjid or the mosque, we pray, we ask God. But are the practice really what we are taught or we are supposed to practice? No question. I see in the world a lot of injustice done by religious people. I mean, through religion. And of course, probably don't agree with me. I was in Jerusalem 2 months ago. I visited the place. Of course, I love the place. Where I see people, I mean, there is coexistence, but no question, there is something is like has a power, somebody does not have the power. This is something is going on. I don't think there will be any closed solution or any. I don't want to get into politics, but I mean, if people understand their faith, their religion, and really they are sincere with that, then we could eliminate a lot of conflicts, and we have more respect to one another, and we can, coexist and live in peace. Unfortunately, this is not happening. We see the war now in Ukraine. We see the other places where it is sad. Killing each other, sometimes the same religion. And this is where we see this in the Middle East, where people try to hijack the religion to serve their own agenda, their own interest. And that would, like making things so difficult, where people have their own interpretation to serve. So when the religion is used to serve politics, that's where the big issue is.
You're reminding me of one of my favorite things that Rabbi Shai teaches. He says that we should be careful to remember that we're created in the image of God and not to create God in our image. Right? And he says, if God hates everybody you hate and likes everybody you like, then you're probably creating God in your image. God really challenges us to be more accepting than we are naturally. So, with your question about coexistence, I want to go back to the Shema, the Ve'ahavta, love your neighbor as yourself. In the Hebrew, there's a kind of a grammatical oddity. It actually says like love, Ve'ahavta et Adonai. Well, no, whatever. I'm doing the Ve'ahavta instead of love your neighbor as yourself. That's my problem. Love your neighbor as yourself is. It actually says love to your neighbor as yourself in the Hebrew. So, which is, odd. So, but we all know, right, that sometimes even people we love, we're not feeling the love at that moment, right? But we can behave in ways as if we love them, right? So the love to your neighbor, it's an action. It's a call to action that, even if I'm not feeling you right now, like that I need to still behave with love and act with love. So I think in terms of coexistence, there is that. I will also say, again, we have, I know that Islam has similar teachings. In the Talmud, it says, that God minted us all with the same mint. And so, our beautiful diversity is something that makes us really strong. The story of the Tower of Babel, where everybody is working together and building this structure for greatness all together. Everybody wonders, like, why is this so bad? Because God destroys the tower and scatters everybody and gives them different languages. One of our rabbis from the medieval times said it's not languages that God gave. God gave everybody different faiths. So that if any of us feel like we have the only path, that we should know that no, God gave different paths and different languages, and none of us have all of it. Not to say that Jews don't think they're right, because like we do, right? Every religion thinks they're right, or more right, but that doesn't mean that we have a monopoly. And in Judaism too, there is something called the Noahide Laws, right? Because everybody comes not just from Adam, but from Noah, right? With the big flood. And so there are 613 laws that apply to Jews. It's a lot. Don't worry, we all don't keep all of them. We're all failures. God loves us anyway. But there's only 7 that apply to other people. So basically, if people are being good, we believe that they're going to heaven or whatever, the life, we call it the world to come, whatever the world after this one is.
I love this idea of love to your neighbor. And going back to the story of the Good Samaritan, I think that's exactly what Jesus is trying to illustrate. So a lawyer or actually someone who's an expert in the Torah asks Jesus, who is my neighbor? And he gives this man a parable about a Samaritan man who's walking the path from Jerusalem to, I forget where, but it's a very dangerous journey, very rocky. It's known to be a dangerous road, and there are thieves there. And this man is attacked and severely hurt. A teacher of the Torah, of the law, sees the man as he is walking down the street, and he makes sure to cross to the other side of the street and passes by this man. Then a rabbi also comes down the street and notices that the man has been beaten and is going to die if he is not tended to, and walks by. And then a Samaritan comes. And I'm sorry, it wasn't the Samaritan that was beaten, it was a man. The Samaritan comes along the road and takes that man, puts him on his donkey, takes him to an inn, and tells the person, heal this person, make this person well. And then Jesus asks, who is the neighbor? And it's the Samaritan. And this is a culture and a group that has been outcasted by the Jews. And he was the one who, to love your neighbor, he practiced that love. So I love that story.
Thank you. So staying on this, some of these adjacent concepts to peace, I was also, when I was thinking about the themes of this event, I thought about the environment and our current environmental crisis, and how the notion of harmony writ large could also encompass our relationship with our environment at the more sort of macro cosmic level. And I'm wondering if there is potential there to sort of expand the concept of peace and harmony and leverage it to tackle our, the environmental crisis and live in harmony, not only with other people, but with nature and with our, natural environment. And whether, especially for us in South Florida, that's a major, tangible crisis, which is only getting worse. And, I've always wondered at the Jaffra Institute if we should make it one of our missions to not only talk about, religion and faith as these abstract, theological concepts, but how we could operationalize them to tackle real-world problems with real-world impacts. So is there something there in Judaism, Islam, Christianity, in terms of these environmental ethos and values that we could actually utilize?
Yeah, I think all the faith, of course, including Islam, promote being friend to the environment and be a source of good to all the creation. Because one saying by the Prophet, when he said that we all depend on God, but the most beloved people to God are those who are good to His creation. And His creation means human being, animal, plant, everything. So this is something it is emphasized a lot in Muslim tradition. I think it is a good idea, or probably, when we get together, have Jewish friend, Christian friend, and we understand that our faith is different when it comes to believe, the way we worship, but we have so many common things to make our world better world. I mean, we all agree that, being good to the environment, save energy, whatever now issues, less pollution, we all agree in this. And this is a big room for us to work together, to help one another, to support one another. And this will be, in fact, from our point of view, this is like serving God, which is that what God wants us to do. God, He is the one who sent Moses and Jesus and Prophet Muhammad, peace be on all of them. So God knows that we're going to be different. We're not going to have the same faith, but He told us, work together, have to coexist. I was born in Damascus, Syria. And I know especially when I was in college, I had Christian friends, I have Jewish friends, and sometimes even we don't know who is Jewish, who is Christians, who is, because they speak the same language and have similar names. So that worked fine. And I think here in the U.S., we are very blessed to have this country, that we have a constitution that guarantee freedom of religion, and everybody can practice and be free to do it. But of course, encourage us as a people of faith, different faith, is to work together. I'm not saying, let me be Christians, or can you be a Muslim? We don't want to do that. We have so many things that we can work on to make this world or our life better. Because this is what got us. I mean, of course, one big principle that when you talk about love your neighbor, I mean, saying Islam, you will not be a true believer unless or until you love for other people what you love for yourself. And that's based also on fairness and being again, as I mentioned, justice. So I believe we should not really argue too much who is right, who is wrong, in terms of because who is a true believer, who is not. This is not, because God told us in the Quran. Only God can do the judgment, not you. Only God can do the judgment. You don't judge each other. But respect, acknowledge and respect. And that I think will lead us to good peace. Thank you.
For me, caring for the environment is a piece of that justice, right? And I actually go back to the creation story again, where God told Adam, you will care, you will be a steward for this earth. You will have, I don't like the word dominion, I don't like that translation at all, but you will be a steward for the whole earth. And so we are to care for everything. That includes humans, but everything, the soil, the plants, the trees, the animals. And that goes all the way out to our fellow humans and how we care for them too.
Just a side note, that word that you didn't really like, in modern Hebrew, it's the word that they use for like preserves, like jam. So it's like more preserving. There's a beautiful midrash where, like written over 2,500 years ago, that when God creates, Adam, that God takes Adam in God's hand and shows Adam creation and says, look at my creation, how beautiful it is. Take care of it, for if you don't, there will be no one to come after you to take care of it. I'm somebody who's very passionate about the environment. I actually wrote a chapter on Judaism and the environment for a social justice book, so I have too many stories to share. But I will tell you, we do have creation, just right from the get-go. The Kabbalistic understanding of creation is that God created us to heal the world and to make the world better. And that's like how we're created in God's image, is that we have the possibility to continue creation and perfect it. In the Talmud, it very much talks about how everything is created for a reason. And in particular, it points out scorpions and mosquitoes and other things that you would squish, okay? And talks about how they have healing properties. There is a very strange law in Deuteronomy that says that you cannot take a mother bird and her egg at the same time, which is a weird kind of rule. So why? So Nachmanides says the reason you can't do both is because you need to preserve the species. Right? If you take the mother and the baby, then maybe we'll lose the species. So, again, and I very much echo what my two colleagues were saying too, that if we can understand how precious this planet is and what a gift it is for us and how it sustains us, if we can live with respect for animals and for plants and for the earth, then it is just going to radiate out that we will have that same kind of love and respect for each other.
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Just an observation. As each of you fine people were speaking, I was, I guess, like a political science person, relating to perhaps the personification of some of those issues. Abdurrahman Wahid of Indonesia, the shortest serving president, because he felt as a leader and as certain members of the Christian community were being decimated on the Irian island by the military in Indonesia, he said, if we can't protect and nurture you in a country that has actually very positive religious rights protections, Indonesia, then we're not worthy of your allegiance. And so West Iria became an independent country. He was a short-termed president of Indonesia because nobody liked what he did. However, he was also a participant in Kenya in 2010, in June, with the new government sliding into potential ethnic clashes and so on. And through the UN volunteered to be there based on his religious, his values of, as you were describing, the love for the other person and so on. And again, many people thought that was kind of unusual. But you know, Indonesia, the third largest country in the world, the largest Muslim country in the world. Wow, okay? And a democracy that is still evolving. And then I'm thinking the person who was hugging the prison guards, the person who asked about their children after the longest time in recent captivity, Nelson Mandela, and what he committed to when he came out of there, based on, or at least as Bishop Desmond Tutu in his book, No Future Without Forgiveness, basically a very unusual vision for everybody. And after his presidency, he called a group of people together at Afrikaans National University, which now has another name, to deal with his three failures. Now, I mean, what kind of presidents do that, especially of a newly reformed republic? His failures in education, his failures in health, and his failures in housing. But he called together the religious leaders to get guidance, and then he took a particular approach, bringing some people together there in July of that year. So I'm thinking of the personification of individuals who, in their chosen political pathways, I think are extensions of the beautiful roots of each of your communities of faith that you're describing. And then on the other hand, I like political novelists. And I think Morris West got it right. In the Shoes of the Fisherman. What do we do with all the capital we have? Well, let's sell it and give it to the poor. Okay, that was a political novel. But Morris West also wrote the book 10 years before it ended about the end of the Vietnam War. Morris West also predicted someone from Eastern Europe and so on and so forth. So unfortunately it wasn't completely predictive, but the concept, why wouldn't that be a possibility? In that case of the leader of the Vatican, converting all those capital assets. So I guess I don't have a question. I just want to say thank you for helping me identify some of the profound roots that undoubtedly were behind some of those observations that are models of what can happen when religiously and also ethically self-understood people reflect, whether it's in jail, whether it was in Jakarta, Indonesia, and because if you look at each of their backstories or biographies, you realize what Pastor Robles was talking about. I call her the transformational, not transitional pastor, because she's annoying or inspiring with regard to, the profound connection, not just of her own faith, but in the faith of others. And I think each of you has contributed that today. So thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, as you were speaking, I was thinking about Archbishop Desmond Tutu and how he would talk quite a bit about that South African principle of Ubuntu. I am because you are. And I think it also falls in line with what we've been talking about.
Okay, so I think we have maybe time for one more question. And I was wondering if you could put your kind of diagnostic lens on and kind of give us a more an assessment of where we stand today in the United States, especially. You know, like I mentioned in the intro, that identity issues are, you know, all over the place. They're sometimes weaponized for political purposes, and you know, politics of outrage, you know, is everywhere as well. And you know what happened to Roe v. Wade, and you know other you know comparable issues that might arise in the future, and you know this the First Amendment rights coming under attack, and so on and so forth. And we're living in this continuous, non-stop, you know, electoral cycle. So, how do you see the future of the issue of faith and having an interfaith, multicultural society in the United States? Are we moving towards more tribalism, more puritanical understandings of faith, or are we going to have a more, you know, diverse, multicultural, you know, society that's not big on the issue of like assimilation? Assimilation is not a virtue, but multiculturalism and diversity is the main virtue. Where do you see things moving forward?
Wow. So one of the radical, amazing things about the United States was that it was founded on religious freedom. And the way that the United States in history has been able to keep religious freedom for different groups is by the separation of church and state. That doesn't mean that God's words are not on state buildings, right? Or that they don't influence the people that we elect. But there is a danger right now where there is one particular religious voice that is pushing out all the other religious voices and saying, this is the one way to understand God, the one way to understand when life starts, the one way to run our country. And so I am somebody, I'm very passionate about so many issues. I wrote my rabbinic thesis on rabbinic approaches to birth control. No matter what branch of Judaism you are in, if a woman's life is in danger, she has a life, and you save the woman, and not the potential. It's a very different understanding than the very loud Christian right understanding of life beginning at conception. There is no room in their world or this dialogue for my understanding of when life begins. And there is not room for the compassion and love that one of my best friends needed when she found out this baby that she had wanted and prayed for and told everybody she was pregnant with was going to be born with a horrible, crippling Jewish genetic disease, meaning it would be born, it would suffer and die. That she would not be able to get an abortion right now in the state of Florida. Because it was after 15 weeks, and at 15 weeks is when you do the genetic scan. How is that love? How is that compassion? How is that? I mean, I had a friend in New York who, again, she was a cantor, which is like a clergy person who sings. And her husband was a rabbi, very religious people. They wanted their baby. They found out at 24 weeks that the fetus was brain dead. And she was walking around and people come over and put her hand on the belly. That she would have to go somewhere special or fly somewhere to be able, it's beyond me. So I don't want to get hung up on the Dobbs decision, but I do want to get hung up on the fact that while we, as I said, like feel so passionately that believing in God means believing in justice and speaking truth to power and hearing the echoes of our prophets, the dissolution of the separation of church and state is incredibly dangerous, because if we make one voice the monopoly, then we're like back in Babel.
Yes. I spoke about this on July 3rd, the day before our Independence Day, about how I am so sad that a group of Christians have taken over to say that, first of all, that all Christians believe this, or that this is the only voice. It's not. And that it's threatening our religious freedom of this country. That is frightening to me, because that doesn't seem to end very well. So that, to me, is extremely dangerous and scary if we would take away others' religious freedom. And to, lift up one group as if they are Lord. One of the confessions in the Presbyterian Church says that it was written during World War II. And it was a confession and it was the confessing church speaking out against the National Church in Germany, saying, "We serve only one Lord, and that is God." I don't want to have to see that happen in this country.
And I want to echo just one more piece, is that when this happens, it's not, there's also a rise happening right now in nationalism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia. If we don't hold on to the multiplicity of voices, we lose everything we've been talking about. We lose all of that peace, all of that acceptance. Because if my way is the right way, then I need to stop you.
Yeah, I believe the religion should make our life easier, happier, in a better situation. So we need to all faith, they need to agree on that religion not to be a way to oppress other people or do injustice to other people. So I say, thank God we are living in a country, hopefully this freedom of religion and separation of church and state or whatever, this is good for us, because we need to promote things, especially when it comes to law, like you mentioned, the abortion things. This is something, is not like one group issue. It's an issue of the whole nation, and we cannot say, oh, we're going to take by this opinion, that opinion. It should be under all these people who are involved, under the flag of the U.S. should discuss it and come up with good rules. Now, if I want to practice my own, that's fine. If I don't want to abortion, I mean, I'm free, I can do it, but I cannot enforce the law on other people. This is important. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Do we have any comments or questions from the audience?
Just have a comment.
Let me get you the
There's
mic.
a phenomenon going on, sponsored by an individual whose name I was not familiar with, which basically, it's called Unify America. And it's not a political group. It's an individual whose technology products compromise nobody, are not in court, some of the most ethical. His name is Matt Getz. I'd never heard of him before, who sponsored a pilot project this summer where a number of us in the pilot would agree to answer 15 questions, and then algorithmically, again, I'm not the math person in my family, but my wife tells me it connects you with people who aren't in agreement with you, and you have 1 hour Zoom in a conversation with someone who sees things differently than you, from abortion, with regard to expressing voters' rights, any number of issues. I had the privilege of making a new friend in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I was a manager of a agricultural co-op, and with whom I didn't agree with a number of things, but I understood where her position was coming from, because no two of us are the same. And when we confer with each other, when we see each other as individuals, then we're a little less anxious with each other's change. The last 6 days of September, the first 6 days of October, a similar process will occur among approximately 5,000 individuals. A number of my students, I won't ask if any here, but are participating. And again, it's basically a one-on-one discussion, the end of which is, you're disagreeing without being disagreeable, but the end of which is to remind people, what is the ecology of democracy when it works well? And so Dave Matthews, the head of the Kettering Foundation, who wrote that book on the ecology of democracy, again, that's when things worked best. Back down almost to the biblical, the Quranic, the New Testament versions of successful communities of faith trying to work hard at improving each other and recognizing differences and so on. So I wanted to mention that you don't have to be a Stoic. In other words, do not disdain misfortune, as I'm told Rosenius said a couple thousand years ago. But you have to be an optimistic Stoic because we got a lot of work to do. And I think our wonderful guest today shared some genius of philosophy as well as practical ways of communicating that I find personally enriching. So thank you for that.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Rabbi Rachel Greengrass and Reverend Kim Robles and Imam Abdulhamid Samra. I really enjoyed this conversation. I really hope and dream that someday, one day, we could more, regularly, institutionally engage people of your caliber and come up with policy-relevant, prescriptions for some of these issues that we tackle, to just move beyond, like the theology of interfaith dialogue, and move towards more like the practicality and the policy relevance of it on issues like, the environment, like social justice, racial justice, a lot of these issues that I think, an interfaith approach can contribute a lot to. So hopefully the Jaffra Institute and our sister institute at FIU, the Jaffra Center for Muslim World Studies, we could collaborate together and bring that dream to fruition. Again, thank you so much for being here, and thanks to our audience who are physically here and to our audience, online. So thank you so much.
Thank you.